Hi everyone, welcome to North and South podcasts. And this is a well-being, politics, kind of creative podcast, which ticks a lot of boxes. But it's a real honour today to speak to Jude Lennon and Ali Harwood, who are people who I've known for a while through the creative societies of Liverpool. And they're both ex-teachers like myself. I left teaching about a year ago, and I've got no NDAs, so I can say whatever I like. It might be different for different people. But basically, I was a teacher for 25 years, and when I left, I was almost crawling to the finish line, as it were. I think mentally, physically, spiritually. And although it's a job I am proud to have done and a job that I loved dearly, in the end, I just felt like the job had just left me completely, particularly since about 2013 when the Gove reforms kind of kicked in. I am quite angry about it still. And I was someone who got involved in union politics as well towards the end of my career. So I did 18 months of casework, which really opened my eyes to the situations in some schools that some colleagues and in our young people are subjected to. So I'm a secondary school teacher and I worked in about 6 or 7 schools over 25 years. I remember my mate saying your first 10 years are the best. And after 25 years, I think he was probably right. So Jude, do you want to just introduce yourself, say what you're doing now and how long you were a teacher?
Yeah, sure. Hi. Yes, I'm Jude Lennon. I am now a storyteller and author. So my storytelling business is Little Lamb Tales. I wear lots of hats, so I do lots of different things over the city, mostly literacy related. I'm co-founder of Build a Book. Highly involved in the Liverpool literacy cycle along with Ali. So I'm still passionate about words, books, reading, and education. I was a teacher for 18 years. I taught mostly early years and lower key stage one. Um, and like yourself, absolutely loved the job. I was teaching my teddies when I was 4. It was the only job I was ever going to do. So if you'd have said to me a few years ago, you'll leave teaching, I would have laughed in your face. But here we are. And I'm sure we'll get onto the reasons why we all departed. But yeah, I did 18 years at the chalk face.
Real. And Jude's been on the podcast before talking about her creative pursuits, and we'll share details in the podcast notes for what Jude's involved with now. Thank you, Jude. And Ali?
Hi Tim. Yeah, I'm Ali Harwood. I'm an artist, poet, and educator, but not always in that order. That makes me an ape. I like to think I'm a curious ape. If I was a poet, educator, and artist, that would make me a P. Um, so I'm probably one of those sometimes as well. What I do now as an artist, I do lots of like commission paintings and illustrations, do work for people like Liverpool famous walking tours, and I have my work shared at the Indie Biennial and that kind of thing. Always drawing, always painting, always writing. As a poet, I enjoy being like a headline poet. So I've quite recently headlined Scratch at Shakespeare North Playhouse in Prescott, which is an amazing venue. I also host Itch, which is the monthly spoken word night there, which I did this Tuesday just gone, and we had 25 people up on the mic, which was great. I also host Live Bards in Liverpool, and last Tuesday, Tuesday before this one, I hosted my 100th Live Bards as host, and it existed before I did, and we had like 27 poets there. I'm also a member of the Wirral Poetry Festival team. And as an educator, I'm still doing stuff. So I've been working with the Southport Learning Trust and Shakespeare North Playhouse, basically delivering a project called Sonnets Aloud to 8 schools in the Southport area, 6 secondaries and 2 primaries in the last couple of weeks. And yeah, I still tutor. I've just come from tutoring a 8-year-old lad down in Speke, who I've been tutoring for about the last 4 weeks. And I still tutor, well, some excluded young people, some gifted and talented, lots of people who are cared for young people, and I do tutor lots of people with Syrian background, basically. So after this, I'll be tutoring a lad in year 5 and then a lad in year 10 who I've been tutoring since he was in year 6. I first started teaching when I was about 2001 and sort of finished full time in 2018. But I've kind of continued going back to it. And I'm a primary school teacher by trade, mainly key stage two, upper key stage two, did lots of time in year six as the SATs person, which I actually really enjoyed. Yeah, so I've still got like Jude, I've still got my hand in there, as it were, and I do visit a lot of schools, but I take my hat off to the people that are still teaching at uh, I would say the chalk face, but I think that's probably the wrong term to use now. Who uses chalk now? Well, I still do, but there we go. Yeah,
That's fine.
that's me basically.
Thank you so much for your insights, folks. Me and Jude were nodding there emphatically when Ali said that he takes his hat off to the people who are still in there. And particularly in recent years, I think looking at the younger people who come in and seeing what they're coming into, I feel like, the frog that slowly got boiled over a number of years, but those young people are very much going into very, very, very hot pans right from the word go. But I think one of the themes with all of us is that although you might leave formal teaching, you're very much teaching in different ways because we're so passionate about learning and helping people and educating and being creative. I know, like, if you're a maths teacher and stuff like that, you might not be considered as creative depending on your interests, but I don't think you ever lose that kind of desire to want to help people and to better people. So thank you very much for the intro. Now, it's been a while trying to get you two together because I value your input so much, and I know you through the creative kind of networks in Liverpool. But I did say earlier, we don't have to stick to this. What were the three key reasons why you left teaching? I'll just give you what my headlines are, and then I'll allow you to come in. But for me, it was workload, lack of trust, and declining behaviour, particularly since COVID, which we can come back to later. So I was just wondering if there was anything there you wanted to comment on, or if you had anything you particularly wanted to highlight. Jude first.
Yeah, I think for me, it was definitely a certain minister coming in and making life very difficult for teachers and wanting to put children in boxes. And particularly when you were teaching early years, children don't go in boxes. What I loved about teaching earlier was the curriculum was so vast, and it didn't just point at English and maths. It was the whole child. And I personally think that early years curriculum should run right the way through, right up to secondary school, because that's how you find out children's skills and what they're really good at. So definitely the governor, the education minister, I'm just going to name him, Mr. Gove, came in and made teachers' lives very, very difficult. And he was like the cherry on the icing of the cake for me. It was the final straw. Workload, absolutely. That was definitely one of them. And I think it was just lack of trust in teachers as a whole. I think we're viewed very much as, you're always just on holiday, you're very lazy. There's all these kind of preconceptions about what it's actually like. And I think anyone who did a day in school who didn't know what it was like would have their eyes well and truly opened. The one thing that it was nothing to do with was the children. It was never about the children. For me, they were the reason I kept going as long as I did. But essentially, the biggest reason that forced me out was ill health. My body just said no. And my doctor said, that's it. You're burnt out. You need to take some time off. And I just decided never to go back. So, yeah, that was the biggest thing for me, was my physical and mental well-being.
Thank you very much for that. Ali, do you want to come in with anything at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can sort of echo with both of you have said in terms of workload, because I love the teaching, and then your day starts with all the marking and all the paperwork, which sometimes you wonder the point of it, and it makes you exhausted for the next day's teaching. And I was deputy head and assistant head, and wasn't getting much time to do that. So being like year six teacher and doing all of that was tricky. So I would say I've got written down here, and I also think it's really interesting that we've got an early years person. I'm sort of primary, and you're secondary, and we're also saying sort of similar things. So me as well, mental health. I was depressed, basically clinically depressed. So I thought I just couldn't carry on. And I've written workload as well. So like the mental health was really important. Being depressed was not good. And I've written down here diminished soul. So, so I think I felt that I was like almost shriveling up. So I'm quite a creative person. Um, and there were lots of avenues where I could actually get that creativity and share that creativity and encourage young people to share theirs, but not enough. And sometimes you do. I always knew how I was going to get to the destination. Sometimes you have to be a bit circuitous and go round and go through the woods and down the valleys, and then you get to where you're going to go. But if you're following schemes of work by the letter, just sometimes you need to like ditch them and just go, this is really boring, or this isn't working. And I found that there wasn't really a scope to do that. Those were kind of the reasons for me. But diminished soul is quite a big one.
I think there's a lot of separate components, but a lot of overlap there. And I remember a colleague of mine saying, this is a 10-year career now. This was about 10 years ago. And in 2013, Michael Gove became the education secretary in, I think, 2010. They got rid of him in 2014 when they knew the election was coming up because he was so unpopular. I think there was a 5% approval rating among teachers. I mean, who those 5% were, I'll never know. But Cameron moved him on, but I think he set up the fracture of the education system, the strict adherence to a curriculum that had to be followed very rigorously, and the imposition of what I heard the leader of the NASUWT union call drive-by inspections, where people would turn up, cause as much damage as possible, and then leave with no consideration for the well-being of the people who they left behind. And I was at a fantastic school from 2012 onwards, and we had 3 inspections, all with RI, because of our progress indicators. Now, I don't want to say too much about the inflation of results further down the system because everyone's under pressure, so they want to look like they're doing a good job, and that puts pressure elsewhere when those achievements kind of standards aren't met, or progress standards. But I think that from about 2013 onwards, I just felt like I was working in a system, not a school. The school I was at was really good, but there was a guy called Bottery who wrote an article in 2003 about teachers, and he said teachers might not like the school, they might not like the educational system, and they might not like the society that they live in. And if you don't feel part of something, then you do lose your soul. And even though I was in a great school, the system, it just battered us. It just battered us. We had these inspections every 2 years. We felt that they just had it in for us because our progress indicators weren't great. They came in looking for stuff, and when they came in, they were like, oh, this is actually a good school. And then they just basically destroyed us in the report. And it was just absolutely soul destroyed. And the big thing for me is how many young people come in and are leaving within the first 5 years. It was 50% a few years ago. I wouldn't expect it to be any better. And I'm thinking, what are we doing to people? You know, this kind of like the Egyptians thing, having slaves, how we can build the pyramids using slavery. What are we saying about the well-being of people when you're just a brick in the wall? And you've got head of OFSTED, Michael Wilshire, who says, my job is to make teachers' lives more stressful. We saw that woman who committed suicide, that head teacher a couple of years ago. I forget her name now, my apologies. And Ofsted have now changed their tack. Oh no, we don't want to be putting too much pressure on teachers and affecting their well-being. Imagine going into hospitals and saying, my job is to make nurses and doctors more stressed. Imagine going into any profession whatsoever and saying, our job is to make you more stressed. And that's what they did to teachers in the early 2010s. And some of the union work I picked up, what was going on in certain schools, I'll never forget it. And it made me really angry. And I think it was that soul and lack of trust. Even in a good school, book reviews, observations. This is on top of like an increasing workload. And it just gets to a point where you just feel like saying, just leave me alone. Anyway, I've rabbited on there.
Yeah, I think you could actually say that even the best teacher in the world, and maybe I'm just like judging by how I found it, but there's always going to be something that you're not doing to a particular standard because something's got to give. So if you're going in there looking to fail someone, you will find something. So whether it's kind of book scrutinies or attainment or achievement or what have you. You can find it. And I think you're actually, it was interesting what you said earlier about sort of inflation of grades and things. I think there was a lot of kicking the can down the road. I was very aware as a Key Stage 2 teacher who was responsible for SATs results, looking at the Key Stage 1 data, and then however that came about, you're meant to make this amount of progress, or the child is meant to make this amount of progress. They do become like a statistic, and you're thinking, okay, well, how can they get from here to here? And I guess as well that might continue when they get to secondary school as well, because you kind of coach them to do the SATs, and then they have the long summer, and they get to secondary school saying they're at this level. You've got to kind of cope with whether they've been assessed correctly as well.
The thing is that happened in early years as well. I was always being told, these results are going to indicate what they're going to get in their SATs in year 2. Are they absolutely accurate? It was like, I'm assessing this child now. This is where this child is now, and this is what they have achieved now. And I just think, and we could probably have a whole month's discussion just about the system in itself, but I do think that the education system is not actually fit for purpose anymore. The world we live in is so different from the one it was devised for, and we should be looking and encouraging skills that are far broader than the ones we're actually saying these are the ones that are worthy skills. These are the skills that we should be judging. It's like, no, everyone's got skills. Some people are academics, some people are not, some people are, designers by nature and stuff like that. And I just think the whole system needs sort of looking at, because not only is it failing teachers, but it's failing young people. It's failing young people because they get out into the big wide world, and it's just like, oh, well, actually, if I'd known that at school, I would have done this instead. This is what I'm good at. And I just think it's just, the whole thing's just topsy-turvy. And just, it was Ruth Perry, the head teacher, who killed herself.
Yeah, may she rest in peace. It was a terrible case.
Yeah, absolutely terrible. So, so there's lots of things we could put right.
Yeah. One of the issues with me, as Ali touched on, like, people can always find something. And I often represented members who were often great teachers, and someone just didn't like them. So you just find something. It's a bit like, Solzhenitsyn, the Gulag Archipelago, like living in fear all the time. Even if your face does fit, even if you're respected within the school, OFSTED can come in. And it was like this constant state of fear, and just that kind of generalized anxiety with this kind of big brother looking at you all the time. And I often found it myself as someone who was a head of year, a head of department, and also who trained other teachers. I always used to, I found it so hard to tell people to do things that I didn't believe in. Thought, well, this is bullshit. In fact, I used to say, listen, this is bullshit, but we need to do A, B, C. That helped me a little bit, but it just still didn't make me feel very good about the overall situation. And I think you almost become caught up in that system where, you've got to play the game. And increasingly the game seems rigged and just completely unfair. And that is what destroyed my soul in the end. I remember reading a head teacher who said one September he came back and he said, I can't pretend that I agree with what I'm being told to say to my staff. Do you know what I mean? It was quite an interesting article. Now, the other big thing is workload. What would you say about the workload as you went through your careers? Because by the end, I just felt that they introduced computers, they introduced this, they introduced that, which are all meant to be more efficient, but they actually then create more work. And I was in some schools where every behaviour incident needed to be logged, and then it was a phone call, and it was ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But that was the system, and that's what we've got to do. Have you got any comments about how workload changed through your careers?
Well, it definitely changed, because when I was head of early years in a school I taught at in London, I was also sort of monitoring PGC students who hadn't and then mentoring them through their first year of qualification when they were in our school. And I remember sitting there with the PGC students saying, nothing will be this bad. If you get through this year, it will not be this bad again in teaching. I couldn't say that now.
Yeah,
I couldn't
absolutely.
have say that, because it's completely changed. And I just think, and again, there's this misconception that if you're in early years, all you do is stock the sandpit and make sure there's red paint, and it's like a little bit more than that. But it was data for data's sake, from what I could see. It was like, fill in this form, and now you've filled in that form, fill it in twice, but in 2 different colours in a different box. It's like, I've just told you that information. Why do you need it in 3 different ways? And everything had to be justified, not once, but not twice, but 3 times, and do this and do this. And then there was a different system for this and a different system for that. And honestly, it was just mind boggling. And on top of all that, you've got to keep in mind, obviously with early years, particularly, you've got that day-to-day contact with the parents and dealing with the families, and there's issues. You can't just say, sorry, I haven't got time for you because I've got to go mark boxes and make sure that these ticks are in the right box in the right colour. Because you've got to give that time to the families and the children who need you, and then that just ramps it up even more. So yeah, workload, absolutely. It just grew exponentially. And I can't say exactly when that was, but it just seemed to suddenly, it went from being manageable. And maybe it's partly my age, but when I did sort of teach and live in London, I was still be able to go out on a school night and go to the cinema or go to a gig. But the time I came out of teaching, if somebody had said to me, you've got to go out tonight for somebody's birthday, I'd have wept. I'd have said, I can't go. I can't go. And I remember actually one Father's Day, it was just before I came out of teaching, we had both dads round here, and my phone went, it was an email from somebody at school, and I just went into meltdown, and everybody went, right, we're going, we're leaving. It's on Father's Day on a Sunday. And I chased away my dad and my father-in-law because I was so tired and so stressed. I mean, that tells you everything, really. So, yeah, shocking. So the workload just volcanoed. Yeah, I can't think of another word for it, really.
I get where you're coming from, but I think I found the workload quite full on from when I started, to be honest. And just surrounded by just too many files and piles of paper and spreadsheets. And I think it has got worse because I work now a lot with young people who have like additional needs and so on. The schools, they have to promise that they're going to put stuff in place that they actually haven't got capacity generally to do. And even with there are so many cases where children are in inverted commas entitled to particular additional support where they're just not getting it, and it's kind of in a way it's unfair on everybody because it's unfair on the school to say, right, we're going to do this and then not have the capacity to deliver it, and it's not fair on the child or their parents or their carers to go, well, you say you were going to be offering this and it's not happening. So I think in terms of workload, just so much to, even things like marking policy and so on. And, the fact I always try to do it. So say, for example, if you're setting homework and if you consider that I was kind of doing year 6, so they're producing more stuff than, say, the year 3s or what have you, but you're also focusing a lot on the English in particular. And then you're just trying to strategically do it so that when you've got the homework, you're thinking, oh, I've got to set all this homework, and then it's got to be marked on top of all the stuff that you're doing for like SPAG and comprehension and writing and stuff. It was just, I always felt like you're swimming and you're swimming against the tide. And however hard you swim, you're getting further away from your goal than when you started. And I think that was one of the things that diminished my soul and just made my mental health kind of spiral a little bit. And I know that towards the end, I struggled to carry on teaching, as it were. You realize that you're tired, you're exhausted, and all the stuff that happens outside of the classroom comes into the classroom because there's nowhere to hide.
Yeah,
But I also have experienced incredible schools, incredible head teachers, and I don't want this just to be like me moaning about stuff because there's amazing things that go on.
I mean, I was just saying that if the whole thing is like walking through treacle, you're literally like dragging yourself through this sticky mess, trying to get through and get out in one piece. And you're right, Ali. I mean, I go into lots of schools now, and there's some wonderful work going on, and in front of the children would never know. But in that staff room, as soon as you go in there and you sit down, you can see they literally come in and they sit, and they have to sort of like just stare into a blank space for 30 seconds before they even get their lunch or think about what they're going to do. And exhaustion is a real thing. It's a real problem. Absolutely.
One thing I noticed towards the end is people just stopped going to the staff room entirely because they were so busy. I also went into a school which was outstanding according to OFSTED, and when you spoke to the staff, they were absolutely immiserated because what the head did. And again, a lot of sympathy for head teachers, but this head, what they did was they just put more and more on top. Whenever there was like an issue, oh, you haven't done this, nothing was ever removed or made more efficient. It just became like some kind of creaking tower of of paperwork to administer, and the staff were absolutely immiserated. But when I was in a school, I literally remember staff saying, it was about 2013, and they said, what's gone on the last few months? And this was in a good school, and that's when I think the system was really starting to get involved. And the hardest feeling for me as a teacher was going through the day with mentally more and more jobs building up at the back of my mind. And then the end of the day comes, and then you get more jobs, and then you haven't even started those jobs, and then you start them. And it was going home completely stressed out. And if you do that, as Ali said, if you do that day after day after day, month after month, term, year, I just felt broken. By about 2015, I just felt broken. I felt like I can't do this.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a nice thing to experience, but I actually broke down and went to see the deputy and said, I can't do this. Went into the office.
I completely get that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had an amazing head teacher, Mr. McCoy. He was the real McCoy. I drove to work one morning and literally said, I can't do this anymore. And he was amazing. He said, take some time. I would, and I was, clinically depressed and all that sort of stuff. And he was really good and he supported me and it was incredible. I've been in other schools where at the first sign of difficulties, they'll kind of pounce on you a little bit more. And even in schools where I've been, a school where I was assistant head and I was doing teacher observations. And there was one teacher, I'm not naming names or anything, but it's one teacher I was asked to go and observe and was told, oh, she's not that great. And she was absolutely fine, did a really good lesson. And she'd lost her husband quite recently. So she was grieving. And, I said it was a good lesson. I got fed back that it was a good lesson to both her and the other senior leaders. And they said, no, that can't be the case. So you're stuck in this kind of situation where you think, well, where is there to go? Where's the humanity? And some schools are like that. Obviously, a lot of really amazing. But when you're in that kind of system, you think, oh, do I belong here?
I remember I was sent to the doctors by work because I went in and my whole arm was just shaking uncontrollably. And the deputy said, look, go now, go to the doctors. And I didn't go back because I literally sat in the doctor's office and I said, well, first of all, he said, you've got to be signed off. And of course, I'd standard teacher, I can't be. I've got too much to do.
Yeah.
You've got to be off because you're burnt out. You need to take time off. I said, but I can't be. How will they possibly cope without me? Oh my gosh. And he went, well, I'm signing you off now. And I just sat down. It was almost like this realization. I just went, I don't think I can do this anymore. And he said, you don't have to. And I just burst into tears. And he just let me sob quietly. And then he just quietly pushed the tissue box across the table to me and just let me sob. And it just felt like a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Like, oh my God, I don't have to go back. I don't have to go back and do that again for another day on the treadmill. And it was absolutely devastating. I'm getting emotional. I think because I never say goodbye to my class. And that was hard.
I think that's what underlines it all out, the passion and the love and the commitment we've got. But it almost comes like a Stockholm syndrome where you're so committed to what you're doing that the system takes advantage of your commitment, and it is sad. When I did the union thing, I had to have that conversation that you just said, due to quite a few people. Like, you don't have to go back, and you could see them looking at you like, who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do that? And we were thinking of the kids. And I thought to myself, that's why we're taking advantage of, because we care so much and because we're human. Do you know what I mean? And it is heartbreaking when you see that and when you feel it and experience it yourself. It's tough. It's tough. Just on the behaviour thing, I worked in some secondary schools, which were often great, and some had difficult kids, but had good systems. But after COVID, I worked in a couple of schools after COVID, which were just complete breakdown. And I don't blame the kids. The systems were unresponsive and not helpful, and literally the SLT, who again were under a lot of pressure, senior leadership, everything was put back on the individual staff. It's your fault. You phone home. You deal with it. And that destroyed people. Literally destroyed people. And I was at one school where 35 people left at Easter one year. And you're just thinking, can you not understand and see what's going on? I felt like I was everyone was thinking it, but you know, in 1984, when they're all screaming at the telly and there's one or two at the back of the room going, what's going on here? I felt like I was in that. And that's just heartbreaking to see for the kids, for the staff, for everyone. Absolutely heartbreaking.
I mean, obviously, I've not had my own class since 2013, 2014. So, but what I can say is from going into lots of schools, the COVID effect is very real. Oh my gosh, you know, speaking and listening has gone down, concentration skills have gone down, sharing has gone down. You know, all those social skills, you know, have just absolutely plummeted. And a lot of schools, you know, when I go into the others say things like, "Oh, you know, they're a wriggly class this year. It's the knock on," and I'm like, "Don't worry, it's fine. You know, it's fine to me. I'll just deal with it." You know, so I think a lot of schools are very aware of this kind of knock on effect because when you think about it, as a whole group of kids who missed out entirely on their early years education and the year one education, the year two education, and those are like really formative for getting you into like primary school and how primary school works. And if you've missed those, and then you've got the kids who missed the transition from end of primary to secondary, and again, that's a massive transitional gap that they've missed out. And so they don't understand what it's like to go from being the big fish in the little pond to like you're the little fish in the big pond. So it's had a huge knock-on effect, and also the knock-on effect of staff as well, who had to then suddenly be teaching online and classes and in bubbles and everything else, and nobody really knew what was going on. Huge, absolutely huge impact. Huge impact.
It was the beginning of the end for me, COVID. I just went back and I said, I'm not doing this again because I'd been away from it. It was like a breakthrough. Sorry, go on.
I would say that in terms of that whole time, I was doing a lot of tutoring then. So I had about 20 different tutees, aged from like 5 to 16. And obviously there was a time when you couldn't actually go to people's houses, and that's what I generally do. So that one-to-one kind of physical interaction is really, really important. So I would do that for a bit, and obviously in a way it's kind of easier in some respects in that particular aspect because you're just on your screen like this and okay, it's next person, but it's not good in terms of learning. So as soon as I could get back into people's houses, I did. And like 95% of the people that I was working with wanted that to happen. And the stories that I heard of just children breaking down in front of their screen because they're just being asked to do a load of stuff on screen. Right. And it's like, you need to use these. You need to use your fingers, your hands, and get in there and be running around and your bodies and being able to see what people look like from the chest downwards sort of thing to see how we respond. And I think as well, coming out of COVID, there are so many schools now where so much of like homework and so on is all on your phone or what have you. And actually, you know, and maybe I'm being old fashioned, but doing things physically and writing things down, I know it's not suitable for everyone, but where possible, it really benefits people. One positive thing from lockdown is that people have realized that the importance of community and the importance of meeting people in actual physical spaces.
Hi everyone, welcome to part 2. Just been talking off record, and then the big consensus is how much we love teaching and how we miss the kids and the staff. And in many cases, like a lot of the senior staff in many schools were just under so much pressure as well. And I do miss my lessons and the passion I had and the interactions and all that. But you just told me an interesting story about you with the doctors. You just want to share that before we move on to how we think things could be different?
Yeah, sure. So I went back to the doctor to get my sick note extended, and he just sat there and he said, and I'm going to make the noise to move with his hand. He got his hand and he literally went on the table. He said, I am sick and tired of having to sign off teach because there's no support in place for them and they're all broken. He said, it's not right. He said, it can't go on. It's unsustainable. And because I was still like a broken wreck myself, I just kind of jumped to my seat and went, okay. I was like, I'm so sorry to put you to any trouble. He said, no, it's not you. He said, it's the system. He said, but it's just so wrong. I was like,
Now, speaking of the system, what ideas have we got? Just to throw one out there, I read a book recently by Krishnamurti, sorry, and he was a spiritualist, but he was very kind of non-religious. And he said that schools need to meet children's needs, and children need to go through a system, and their needs and interests and the way they are, it needs to be uniquely shaped towards them. And this like kind of old Fordist kind of Taylorist model of like a factory that you go through, particularly when the curriculum was introduced, the national curriculum, and Gove made it tighter. But one of the biggest injustices I saw in education, and I'm someone who went right through and did okay, kind of suited me, that kind of style of doing things, is those who don't like school or are neurodiverse or who struggle with school or who deal with gross problems of inequality, was forcing them to go through a particular system, which by the end I just said, this cannot continue. It is not fair. If I was in a meeting, if someone said to me, right, you're going to this lesson about computing, I respect computing. But if you tried to make me sit through a computing lesson, do you know, with all that programming, I would go absolutely crazy. And yeah, that's what we're asking children to do. And we're also asking young people, a third of them, to be labelled as failures under the current exam system. That's how it's designed to work. And I just find that abhorrent, children's needs not being met. So have you got any ideas, folks, for how you would change things, etc.?
Well, I think we'd all be singing from the same hymn sheet on this. You've got to give teachers more autonomy. They know their classes. They know the children they work with. They know them really well. And if you know that, little Johnny needs to play with a Lego to assimilate his mathematical understanding, then that should be okay. And it shouldn't be, oh, it's not on the curriculum and we don't do Lego till week 3. It's like, oh gosh, we're all slave to this kind of like, it must be done on a certain week, and this is lesson 3, week 1, section 20 minutes, next section 20 minutes. It's too prescribed. I think you need to give more autonomy to teachers to say, right, I know my class. I know for this class, my cohort this year are not going to be sitting down in front of a board of learners. They need to be out in the playground doing physical measuring. That's what we're going to do. And it's to be okay to do that and to not feel that you're somehow breaking the law or doing something really naughty. So
Yeah.
that's what I think.
To that, Ali?
Okay. Well, I think we have to remember that the system is made up of people, and each person actually has agency and has the power to do something within that system, however small it might be. And I think we have to remember that, because otherwise we are literally just slaves to the system. So it's kind of, as you mentioned, like Alexander Solzhenitsyn earlier, one person can change somebody else's life. How could things be better? I found that when I had a small class size, it actually worked really well, because then I knew the children, and I could actually do things like mark their books and so on. So I was really fortunate when I was teaching in Matthew Arnold Primary in the Dingle. I was teaching year 6 for like 3 of the 4 years. We got really good SATs results, but we got really good SATs results because I could go around and I knew the children pretty well, and it was doable. When you're and I only had like about 20 children in my class, and then you realize we are now a community, we're not a class. So numbers are kind of important. I would also say things what Jude said about sometimes like, well, going outside, so being a bit more physical, and doing things with the community, but also having responsibilities, because a lot of children really respond well to not rights, but rights and responsibilities. So if you've got responsibility for somebody else, then it bigs you up a little bit, and you go, yeah, I've done that thing for that other person. And I've really noticed that when you have clubs where people are helping other people, that's really good for people's just general well-being and mental health as well. And I would say give people choices, that whole thing in lessons where it's a failure if not every person has made progress. If everyone made progress in every lesson, my goodness, we'd be in a society of super people. So, I'm really fortunate now in terms of when I go into schools, I'll kind of give a choice. You can do this if you like, or you can do that. Right. So they're not all going to come up with the same, the sausage factory is not going to produce the same sausage at the end of the day. And I've found that's worked really well. So I have the luxury of being able to go in and say, you can choose to adopt, adapt, or ignore what I'm suggesting that you do. And then you get some really interesting results as well. And you'll get there with everybody in the end. It's a lot trickier in some ways, but it's simpler in other ways, because you're paying attention to what each of the young people in your care is what floats their boat, basically.
Brilliant. Jude.
Just to follow, because I mentioned this before, but I say it again because I think it's so important. The early years type curriculum where you give equal footing to a range of skills, sort of physical activity, creativity, speaking and listening, PSHE, maths, should run right the way through primary school, because I think that would make sure that children have a far more grounded education. It wouldn't be so focused on just reading and writing and maths. And I think that would be a big thing as well, because it really encourages those children who are just not academic, but they're brilliant at creating things or designing things, and that's where their real talents lie, and it would just encourage that.
Ali?
I completely agree. I was in Greenbank High last week, and the English and drama teacher there had, I think it was a year 8, it's a girls' school, year 8 drama lunchtime class, and it was brilliant. They were doing all sorts of games and activities, and like, okay, pretend that one of you has just come in from a night out, and but your parent is really annoyed with you, but there's a baby asleep next door. How are you going to do? Amazing, right? And also when he got the kids to the girls to put the chairs away, he said, "Do it as if you're a toddler that's just learned to walk." So that was really funny. But also, what a lot of those girls said, and with other young people in both secondaries and primaries, was, we just want to be children. And this is like 12 and 13-year-olds. So I think what Jude does in terms of going in and telling stories, like traditional stories and all those sorts of things, and ones which are like more modern, but allow children to be children, allow us to like talk about dragons and princesses and kings and queens and fables and that kind of thing. It's so important, because sometimes those are more real and they tell more truths than kind of when you're constantly like fixed on the news and particular and different agendas.
Yeah,
Can I just say, just before you come in, Jude, everyone says, "Oh, teachers, they're always moaning. Look what we want to do. Look how positive we are." Like, everyone's putting their hands up. Jude, go on.
Well, what I was going to say is that when I go in and do my author talks, I always say at the end, how can we improve your writing? I bet your teachers are always asking. I said there's 3 key things: read every day, write every day. And the third one, I say, this is so important, particularly years 5 and 6, play every day. You've got to play. We have to play. As adults, we have to play, because when you play, you become creative and you use your imaginations. And if we're squashing that play out of children when they get to year 1, because we're saying, oh, you're too old to have a role play area now, or to get the bricks out and play and build, then no wonder kids are like turned off from education. So we need to get people playing. And I'm so delighted that secondary school kids are saying, I just want to be a child, because I think we're only children for so long, and being an adult's a trap. Let's be honest. It's an absolute trap. What is this trap we've fallen into, to be grown-ups and be full of responsibilities that we don't want? Be a child for as long as you can, and we should be absolutely encouraging that, absolutely, all the way.
Phenomenal. And what's the theme that's emerging from what we just said? It's about allowing people to be human, allowing people to be individuals while respecting groups, allowing people to progress, allowing people to pursue their interests, and choosing skills. But I mean, that thing about you're a parent, your kids come in late, but there's a kid next door, learning them skills, getting them, that's probably something that they'll experience in the home themselves. Do you know what I mean? Those kinds of scenarios. And like, someone can go through school, being outstanding, performing in exams, but not know how to order sweets in a shop. Like, particularly the COVID generation, all this card tapping and all this kind of thing. We're talking about autonomy for teachers, a curriculum that meets individuals' needs, that is adaptive. We're talking about smaller classroom sizes. Now, I remember some smart aleck coming into my school years ago saying, there's a lot of international data to show that smaller class sizes don't work. And I remember thinking, do you know what, maybe you're comparing this society. And I said, do you know all the teachers now I had 36 in my year 9s when I started teaching. Couldn't even, didn't know half the kids' names. I said, if you halved them classes for those staff, you would see a significant improvement in progress. In the long term, things might balance down. But why are staff leaving? Because they're having to teach classes of 30 because they can't cope. Reduce the workload, allow them to move around the class, allow them to speak to the kids. You can't speak to 30 kids. Do you know what I mean? Be human. And this is what we're talking about. We're talking about just giving young people autonomy, teachers autonomy, systems adaptability, and to give people choice. What are you into? What do you want to do? I mean, you can't say to me that you've got, I don't know, someone who's good with the hands. You can't be giving them work that involves them learning skills to do with their hands, technical skills, engineering skills in primary school if necessary. Let's expand and not have this rigid system. It's a no-brainer to me.
There's a lot of teachers who would love to do that, and it's just a case of the government listening to teachers and saying, yeah, actually, do you know what, you are the experts in this, or just like car mechanics are the experts in their field, or carpenters are the expert in their field. We are the experts when it comes to knowing what works for young people and for young children. And it shouldn't be rocket science to look at that and go, well, actually, we could make this much better than it currently is.
I think one of the other things as well is we need more humility and more honesty. I want to say that kid isn't making progress in my lessons. There's something not right, and not be told, oh, there's something wrong. No, I'm telling you because that's in the kid's interest. We need to find out what's going on here. We need to give them more support at home. We need inspectors to come into schools and the head teachers say, we're doing A, B, C, D, right. We need to improve EFG. If you've got any good advice on EFG or you want to give us a few pointers, that's great. But don't be going home in your briefcase and your smart car later and condemning us, online. So then people send the kids to another school who are being less truthful. We need humility, we need honesty, we need transparency in the system and allow people to know what it's really like and what's going on. Because this thing, pretending everything's fine. And I had parents who used to call me and raise concerns. I felt like saying, I completely agree with you. But you can't say that, you know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, we're doing our best to make sure that the behaviour's good and the standards are high and all that. And I feel like saying to the parents, I couldn't agree with you more. But my lad's 5. I often say to him, what's the best thing you do today? And it's like a running joke. He says, play, smiling. And I think we need more honesty and humility and transparency. We need inspectors who come in to help a school. I'd have them in more often if they came in to help rather than condemn. Come in and say, oh yeah, you could try this, you could try that. Share your expertise. But don't be coming in with this kind of ruthlessness. It's not fair.
The school I was in where I left, they were getting support from the local authority, and they came in, and the maths expert came and she called me out of class, and she sat and she said, so what can I do to help you? I said, well, I'm head of early years. This is what we're doing. She said, but I don't know why I've been asked to speak to you because I don't know anything about early years, and you were outstanding in the thing, so I don't really know what I can do to help you. I said, shall I just go back to my class and do what I was doing? She went, yeah, right then. I thought, what a waste of time for everybody. They got somebody to cover me so I could leave my class to come and be told that there was nothing they could do to support me. And I was just like, who was that for? Who was that for? Just so she could tick a box and said, I came in and did what I did. It's just like, no help to anybody. But you're so right. If they came in and said, right, okay, don't see us as inspectors, see us as partners. We're going to pick up and we're going to say, yeah, this is great. And how can we support you in those? I think teachers would be open for that because all we want to do is always do the best for the kids in our care. We want the best for them. We want them to be able to achieve what they can. And I think you're absolutely right. If it was more of a partnership, I think that would be a much, much better footing. But unfortunately, too many people who end up as inspectors have just got, I don't know, an axe to grind or are just power hungry. I don't know what it is, but it's just, yeah, it's not working.
It's like the Stanford prison experiment. Right, you be the guards and they start acting like ruthless guards, you know what I mean? But it's interesting. Ali, have you got anything you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think people should be honest and realize when things aren't going right as well, going, oh, well, that's not working. Like I say, I'm invited along to like people's PEPs and all those sorts of things as well to kind of be an advocate for the young person if their parent or carer isn't quite sure about all the terminology and all the acronyms and so on. If people are scrolling down and go, oh, this is fine, I can go, hang on a minute, well, I can advocate for the young person. So there is that aspect to it. And I think with schools and education generally, there should be, if possible, the ideal thing is a triangulation between the learner, the teacher, and the responsible adult, their parent or their carer, and you should all be working together and having that communication. And where it breaks down is where, and I think you have it a lot now, where parents will just take exactly what their child has said and take that as absolutely, God's honest truth, and then go with it rather than go, okay, well, my child said this, and can we discuss what happened in this particular lesson? Because I think sometimes relationships break down that way. So I'm not talking there about inspections and so on, but I'm talking about the general day-to-day with the whole school community, as it were. But in terms of inspections as well, I've had good ones and lots of not so good ones. And sometimes if it feels like there's an agenda coming in even before they've had a look at the school, whatever you do isn't going to make any difference. So yeah, and also just having the kind of the dark cloud of Ofsted hanging over you is horrible. And I think to me, and again, I'm not an insider as much as I was anymore, but the new system looks worse than the old one because it's just so complicated that I think it could potentially be even worse than the old one. I'm still positive. I don't want to be negative.
I can imagine Michael Gove listening to this saying, "Oh, this is just cultural Marxism, 60s trendy hippie teachers wanting to go back to the good old days and all that." And I would just invite anyone to go into a modern school and just have a look around and see what the kids are doing and ask the kids if they're happy, ask the staff if they're happy. And I'll tell you what, there are some great schools out there and there's some great management teams, but some of the management I've seen in some schools, admittedly often in very tough areas where they're struggling to get any real traction. It is tough, but I've been in schools.
Can I tell you something that happened to me as well? Because I kind of ran about, what was it, 2022, something like that. I went back and I was doing a bit of supply and I was nice and refreshed and I've been doing lots of different artistic stuff. I went into a particular school. A teacher was off on long-term sick, I think it was. And I was doing a really good job. When you think, this is me at my best as a teacher, right? And I thought, I'm on top of everything. I'm doing really, really well. And I was quite up for staying on for a bit, right? And it got to, I've been there for several weeks, and I was being paid at a reasonable rate, but when you go in on supply, it's not very good. And then beyond a certain number of weeks, then you are meant to be paid at your pay grade, right? And then what happened to me was I was brought to the head teacher. So the head teacher, the acting head teacher and deputy head teacher basically said, we can't afford to pay you. So if you're talking about teachers not going back into the system, I was on the verge of going, yeah, I can carry on doing this. But when you're not prepared to pay the proper rate, so then that class is just going to get another supply teacher who's got to go through all that, getting to know them again, and going through that, the difficulties when you have behaviour management and so on, which I completely got on top of, and it was great. It was brilliant. Everyone was functioning really well, and it's just like that was kind of the final straw for me, which was like, it's not worth it because you're not valuing what I'm doing.
I think the impact of austerity and the cuts and budgets has been huge as well, and that's been one of the factors that's underlined a lot of the issues that we've raised. Jude, did you want to say something there?
No, I was just agreeing. I think, it's all about valuing teachers. And it's weird, isn't it? Because children are supposed to be our most precious commodity, and yet we don't want to pay a decent amount for people to look after them in terms of childcare. We don't want to pay people a decent amount in terms of educating them. And it's like, but they're our most precious commodity. So why are we not investing in them? And that's what I can't understand. It's like, we want to get the best from these children, then we give them the best. We give them the best.
Funnily enough, I did a lesson once where we had the kids doing Roman battle tactics. I was a history teacher, so I told the kids what the Romans did, and then they acted it out. And this senior teacher gave me a 4, and they didn't demonstrate any progress, and you didn't give them any autonomy. I said the Romans didn't do autonomy. I said I was trying to teach them that was how the Roman army worked, and she gave me a 4. And a few years later, I did the same thing in another school, and I actually bumped into an ex-pupil about, I don't know, 10 years afterwards, and they said that they can still remember the Roman army battle on the yard. And I think if anything demonstrates what's wrong with education, maybe that little story just tells you what it's like. And we'll tie it together now. I think we went through some of the issues. I think we've been so positive really about what we want and how things could be better for our kids and for everyone's kids and for all the teachers and all the staff. What do we want for our kids? We want them to be educated, to become members of society, to learn, to pursue their interests, and to feel valued. We want teachers to feel valued, and we want schools to be open and democratic. What's going on in our schools? Let's talk about it. We've got issues here, we've got issues there, and let's deal with them. All this hush hush and all this like political nonsense and interference from government and curriculum. Like literally, oh, that's lesson 4, this is lesson 5, this is lesson 6. I mean, that can be helpful in some ways. Like I've had schools where it says, oh, you can do whatever you want, but broadly it's this. And I'm just so sad about how I felt towards the end, really, and what I saw so many people going through. It just really saddened me. And I just feel bad for the kids. I feel bad for the staff, the senior staff, and also the young teachers coming in nowadays. I just really fear for them and their mental health moving forward. So that's all I've got to say. I don't know if you've got any closing comments, folks.
I think I'd just like to say that I don't regret leaving teaching at all because I still teach. I still teach all the time. It's just on my terms now, which is wonderful. I don't regret leaving teaching. I regret how I was made to feel, which led me to leaving teaching. That is something that I think could be avoided for lots of people. We feel forced to a pinnacle where we've got no choice except to jump off the cliff and see what on earth happens. So I don't regret leaving teaching, but I do regret how I was forced to make that decision. But I think the most important thing I want to say is that children are fabulous, whether they're 3-year-olds, 14-year-olds, they're brilliant, and they're our future. So I think anyone who is still teaching, who's listening to this, hats off to you. Keep going. I know sometimes it'll be hard, but if you do feel that you can't do it anymore, it's okay. That's okay to say, do you know what? I've done my bit and I'm out, and that's okay as well.
I would completely echo what Jude said there. And also sometimes, we've all talked about kind of getting basically worn out and burnt out. Actually, as a teacher, you have got loads and loads of skills. And I think sometimes when you're in a school or when you're in that setting, you get very blinkered and you think, oh, I couldn't do anything else. I can't do anything because you're always kind of being told, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. And actually, having been a teacher for a sustained period of time has actually helped me in the other stuff that I do now. Even things like classroom management and behaviour management, even with like adults and so on as well, like hosting events, is so good. So yeah, if you're still a teacher now, hats off to you. Thank you very much. But also, like Jude said, if it's getting a bit too much, there's a big old world out there, and you can use those skills and develop them in other areas as well. And also, if you're a child at school and you hate school, you don't like it, there is an alternative as well. The fact is, the world out there is full of potential, and you can find your place in it. And sometimes, I mean, when I first started, before I started tutoring, I thought, why would anyone need tutoring? You just need to go to school and it's fine, right? And the longer I've been doing whatever it is that I do, the more I realize, there's not a one size fits all solution. So if you don't quite fit in, that's okay.
Yeah, I would say that for teachers as well, that message. I spoke to someone recently and said, listen, if you leave teaching, that's okay. And yeah, I think I said it before. He just looked at me like, what? Like, it's okay. And also for students, I just want to stick up as well that maybe my secondary experience, that you sometimes get some very, very difficult students, and you must get them increasingly in primary schools with neurodiversity and all this stuff, and the lack of special educational needs and disabilities provision. But even the most difficult kids who I've ever taught, if I was in their shoes, I probably wouldn't be any different, Because if you're, as an adult, if someone said to me, you're going there every day and you hate it and it's not for you and that lesson isn't for you and you just don't get it and you struggle with your literacy, it's right that you would rebel against that. And I think that the system is letting those kids down as well as everyone else. So, let's think about all the people who were affected by this. And as we say, we're all so positive about it all, but it is terrible sometimes what we see in schools. And I was listening to someone who works in a hospital the other day, and times are tough across a lot of sectors of society, and maybe they always have been. But there is hope, and as Ali and Jude have both said, there, you don't have to stick at it. And also for the children, there's other ways of doing things, and there's life beyond school as well. But I just want to say thank you very much for your time and for sharing your stories. And hopefully, people out there who are teachers, ex-teachers, or have not been teachers and parents, whatever, I've got a lot from that, and I've heard, if you like, from the horse's mouths.
Keep your eyes peeled for what's going on. Jude's doing loads of stuff in like libraries and schools and everywhere. And congratulations to Jude on your award for the Liverpool City region. Is it educating?
Improving education and learning. Yeah,
There you
thank
go.
you. Thank you, Ali.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, folks.